I'm Dr. Kenna Sharma, 25, female. I live and breathe the cosmos. As an astrophysicist at a prestigious national institute, my world is one of distant stars, complex data, and the quiet, thrilling pursuit of knowledge. I was, by all accounts, a prodigy, earning my PhD at 22 and quickly making a name for myself with my research on exoplanetary atmospheres. My life was my work, a universe I navigated with passion and precision. But I was about to discover that the most dangerous black holes aren't in deep space. They're the smiling, familiar faces in the office next door. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The email felt like a supernova in my quiet universe. It was from the Institute's board, officially announcing my promotion to head of the Exoplanetary Research Division. At 25, I was the youngest person to ever hold the position. The promotion was the culmination of 3 years of relentless work, specifically my pioneering analysis of the Kepler 186f system, which hinted at conditions ripe for life. I had poured my soul into that research, spending countless nights staring at light, curved data until the numbers blurred into constellations. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated joy. I had earned this. I had proven myself. My first thought was to celebrate with the people who'd been on this journey with me. My team. There was Dr. Marcus Thorne, the Institute's director, a man whose stern approval I had worked so hard to gain. There was Dr. Ben Carter, a senior researcher who had been my primary competitor for the role. I hoped we could bury the hatchet and work together. And then there was Chloe Davis. At 26, she was a data analyst and my closest. I thought my only friend at the Institute. We had started as interns together, navigating the high, fresher academic environment side by side. I wanted to do something special. I booked a private dining room at the Celestial, an upscale restaurant downtown with a fitting name. It was expensive, but I didn't care. This was a once-in-a-lifetime moment. I sent out a carefully worded email invitation to the entire 12-person department to celebrate this new chapter and to thank all of you for your hard work and collaboration. Please join me for dinner and drinks. The responses trickled in. Congratulations, Kenna, looking forward to it. From a few junior analysts, Ben sent a curt, congrats, see you there. Chloe responded with a string of excited emojis and a can't wait to raise a glass to the new boss, even Dr. Thorne replied with a formal, well done, Dr. Sharma. I will be in attendance. I felt a warm glow of anticipation. Maybe I wasn't just a colleague to them. Maybe I was finally part of the inner circle. The night of the party, I arrived 20 minutes early, my heart thrumming with a nervous energy. The room was beautiful, with a long mahogany table and a window overlooking the city lights. I smoothed down my dress, a simple but elegant navy blue silk, and told the waiter that my guests would be arriving shortly. 7:30 p.m. came and went. That was the official start time. I sat at the head of the long, empty table, my smile feeling increasingly brittle. I checked my phone, nothing. At 7:45, I texted Chloe, hey, running late. No reply. At 8:00, the first text came in. It was from one of the junior analysts. So sorry, Dr. Sharma. Something unexpected came up with the kids. Have a great time. A few minutes later, another one. Feeling under the weather, so sorry to miss it, congrats again. The excuses were polite, detached, and trickled in one by one over the next hour. Each ping of my phone was another small crack in my composure. Ben's text was particularly cold. Sorry, tied up, rain check. Dr. Thorne didn't even bother with a text. But it was Chloe's silence that hurt the most. I called her. It went straight to voicemail. I stared at the empty chairs, the pristine place settings, the 2 bottles of expensive champagne sitting in buckets of ice. The waiter kept looking over with a pitying expression that made my skin crawl. At 9:30 p.m., I finally accepted the truth. No one was coming, not my boss, not my rival, and not my best friend. The silence in that opulent room was deafening, a vacuum where the sounds of celebration should have been. I paid the exorbitant bill for a party of one, my hands shaking as I signed the receipt. I walked out into the cold night air feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my life, a lone, insignificant speck in a vast, indifferent universe. The next morning, walking into the Institute was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. The air was thick with an unspoken tension. I could feel eyes on my back as I walked to my office, the new title on the door, Dr. Kenna Sharma, division head, feeling like a cruel joke. The apologies, when they came, were worse than the silence. They were delivered in passing, with averted eyes and a rushed tone. "Hey, Kenna, so sorry about last night," Ben muttered as he passed me in the hall, not even breaking his stride. "My dog was sick. You know how it is. He was a terrible liar. He didn't own a dog. Chloe was waiting for me in my office, holding a coffee. Oh my God, Kenna, I am so sorry," she began, her voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. "My phone died and my car wouldn't start. It was a total nightmare. I feel absolutely awful." She handed me the coffee as a peace offering. I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe that the person I'd trusted, the one I'd shared late, night study sessions and secrets with, hadn't abandoned me, but her explanation felt hollow, rehearsed. I just nodded, murmuring, "It's okay, don't worry about it," and my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. Dr. Thorne called me into his office later that afternoon. He didn't apologize. He sat back in his large leather chair, steepling his fingers. "Sharma," he began about the celebration. It was perhaps a bit premature, a touch ostentatious. Leadership is about humility, not fanfare. I was stunned. "I just wanted to thank the team, Dr. Thorne, of course," he said with a condescending smile, "but a team's respect is earned through quiet diligence, not expensive dinners. Let this be a learning experience." He dismissed me with a wave of his hand, turning back to his computer. I walked out of his office, the humiliation from the previous night now curdling into a cold, hard knot of anger. This wasn't a series of unfortunate coincidences. This was coordinated. This was a message. For the next week, I tried to pretend everything was normal. I held team meetings where Ben would subtly question my every decision and Chloe would offer support that somehow managed to undermine me. "Kenna's right, of course," she'd say, "but maybe we should consider Ben's point about the data calibration. He does have more experience." They were a pincer movement, one overtly hostile, the other masquerading as a friend, both working to erode my authority. The discovery, when it happened, was accidental. It was a Saturday, and I had come into the office to get some peace and quiet. As I was walking past a common area, I saw a tablet left on a table. It belonged to a junior analyst who I knew was friends with Chloe outside of work. The screen was lit up, open to a social media page, and there it was, a photo, dated the night of my celebration. It was a group shot, a selfie taken in a loud, crowded pub. In it, my entire team was laughing, raising their beer glasses to the camera. Ben had his arm around Chloe, who was beaming, and in the background, holding a pint and smiling smugly, was Dr. Marcus Thorne. The caption, posted by the analyst, read, "Sometimes you just need a real team night out, #workfamily, #celebration." I stared at the screen, the cheerful faces mocking me from behind the glass. Every detail burned into my memory, the timestamp, the location, the triumphant gleam in their eyes. They hadn't just skipped my dinner. They had thrown their own party on the same night to celebrate without me. My so-called promotion was a sham. They had given me the title, but had no intention of giving me the respect or the position. They were isolating me, making it clear that I was not, and never would be, one of them. The static of suspicion in my mind finally cleared, and the signal came through with chilling clarity. This was an act of war. The pain was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest. For a full day, I allowed myself to feel the entirety of the betrayal. I thought of Chloe, of our shared dreams and complaints, and realized it had all been a performance. I thought of Dr. Thorne's lecture on humility and saw it for the gaslighting it was. But by Monday morning, the grief had crystallized into something else, resolve. If they wanted a war, they would get one. But I wouldn't fight it with their weapons of petty cruelty and social exclusion. I would fight it with mine, data, logic, and meticulous attention to detail. I was the head of the Exoplanetary Research Division. That meant I had oversight of the Institute's most valuable asset, the raw, unfiltered data streaming in from the space telescopes. My primary project, the one that had secured my promotion, was a deep dive analysis of Kepler 186f, an Earth-sized planet in the habitable zone of its star. But I had recently been granted access to a new, more powerful instrument, and the preliminary data was pointing to something revolutionary, a potential second Earth-sized planet in the same system, one that the rest of the world knew nothing about yet. This was my ace, a discovery that would be talked about for decades, and I suspected it was what they were really after. They didn't just want to humiliate me, they wanted my work. My first step was to secure my research. I began transferring all my critical findings, my algorithms, and my raw data onto an encrypted, air-gapped hard drive. a system completely disconnected from the Institute's network. I left a slightly older, less complete version of my work on the shared server, enough to make it look like I was still actively working there. Next, I needed to understand the extent of their conspiracy. As a division head, I had administrative access to system logs. I started running back checks, looking for unusual activity. It didn't take long to find. There was a clear pattern of unauthorized access to my project files. The logins came from Dr. Thorne's personal terminal, but they always occurred late at night on weekends, times when Thorne, a creature of habit, was never at the Institute. But I knew who was Ben Carter. He was using the director's credentials to copy my research. How did he get the password? The answer, I knew, had to be Chloe. She was a data analyst. Her job was to manage the flow of information. She would know the system's vulnerabilities. I set up a discrete keylogger on my own terminal, masked as a routine software update. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, Chloe stopped by my office. Hey, my terminal is acting up, and I need to run a diagnostic on the network. Can I just use yours for a sec? She asked, her voice breezy and casual. Sure, I said, stepping aside. I watched as she typed, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Later that night, I checked the keylogger's report. She had quickly and efficiently opened a hidden command prompt and reset a network password flag, granting herself a back. Door entry point. She was their mole, their inside agent. The pieces were falling into place. It was a classic academic heist. Thorne provided the top-level cover. Ben did the dirty work of stealing the data, and Chloe facilitated the breach, all while playing the part of my supportive friend. They were letting me do all the hard work, the thousands of hours of painstaking analysis, and they planned to swoop in at the last moment and claim the discovery as their own. They would present it as a team effort, led by Thorne and Carter, with my contribution reduced to a footnote. The promotion wasn't a reward, it was a cage. They had given me a bigger office so they could better watch me work. I compiled everything I found into a secure file on my encrypted drive. I named it the Kepler dossier. It contained server logs, screenshots of the social media post, the keylogger report, and a detailed timeline of their actions. It was the beginning of my evidence, the foundation of my counter-attack. They thought I was just a naive kid playing with stars. They had no idea I was mapping their downfall. Pure data wasn't enough. I had proof of their misconduct, but in the political snake pit of academia, proof could be buried. Thorne was well connected. He could easily paint me as a disgruntled, paranoid young scientist. I needed more than just evidence. I needed a trap so elegant and undeniable that when it sprang, it would obliterate their careers without a shred of doubt. For that, I needed guidance. I couldn't trust anyone at the Institute, so I reached out to the one person I knew was beyond reproach, Dr. Alastair Finch. He had been my PhD supervisor at university, a brilliant, semi-retired professor with a razor, sharp mind, and a deep, seated contempt for academic politics. We met at a quiet cafe far from the Institute. I laid everything out for him, the empty restaurant, the secret party, the day to theft, the Kepler dossier. He listened patiently, his brow furrowed. When I finished, he took a slow sip of his tea, Kenna. He said, his voice grave, "This is an old and ugly story. The academic world is littered with the ghosts of brilliant minds crushed by mediocre men with seniority. Do not let them make you a ghost." I won't, I said, my voice firm. I'm going to expose them, but I need to do it perfectly. A direct confrontation is pointless. He advised, they will close ranks and deny everything. You must create a situation where they expose themselves. You must use their own greed against them. His advice clarified my strategy. I couldn't just catch them with their hands in the cookie jar. I had to get them to proudly parade the stolen cookies down Main Street. The upcoming Global Space Symposium was in 6 weeks. It was the largest and most prestigious event in our field, attended by scientists and journalists from around the world. It was the perfect stage. I knew Thorne and Ben were already planning to present. I just had to make sure the presentation they gave was the one I wanted. My plan was complex and required me to operate on 2 parallel tracks. On the Institute's network, for all my colleagues to see, I continued my work on the old data. I complained about hitting dead ends, about instrumentation errors, about the signal being too weak. I performed the role of a struggling, overwhelmed young leader, just as they expected me to be. I even asked Ben for his senior input on a few problematic data sets, feeding his ego while subtly logging his every interaction with my work. But at home, on my secure system, the real work was happening. The new data was even more incredible than I had imagined. It wasn't just a second habitable planet. My analysis showed that this second planet, which I privately named Ethel, had atmospheric biosignatures. Not just water vapor and oxygen, but faint traces of methane and other gases arranged in a combination that strongly suggested biological processes. It was the closest thing to proof of alien life humanity had ever seen. The discovery of a lifetime. Now came the critical part of the plan, the honeypot. I began to construct a new, fabricated dataset. It was a work of artful deception. It would lead them to the correct conclusion that a second planet existed, but I would build a fatal hidden flaw into the orbital mechanics calculations. It was a subtle error, one that would seem plausible on a surface-level check but would collapse under expert scrutiny. It was an academic time bomb. I also needed a delivery system. I couldn't just leave the data lying around. I had to make them think they had earned it, that they had outsmarted me. This was where Chloe was invaluable. I decided to confide in her. One afternoon, I invited her into my office, closing the door and putting on a show of exhausted frustration. "Chloe," I'm at my wit's end, I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I think I've found something huge in the new data stream, but I can't crack it. Thorne and Ben are breathing down my neck. I think they're trying to steal my project." I let a tear well up in my eye. Chloe's sympathetic mask snapped into place. "Oh, Kenna, no, that's horrible. How can I help? I've hidden my real progress in a password, protected partition on the server. I lied, my voice a conspiratorial whisper. The password is the designation of the first pulsar ever discovered, PSRB 1919+21. Please don't tell anyone, I'm trusting you." It was the perfect bait. The password was real, but it led to the flawed dataset, the time bomb. I knew within minutes of leaving my office she would be running to Ben. I had aligned all the variables. All I had to do now was wait for them to fall into my orbit. The weeks leading up to the symposium were a masterclass in psychological warfare. I played my part to perfection. In team meetings, I presented my frustrating and inconclusive findings from the older dataset. Ben would sit back, a smug look on his face, occasionally offering condescending advice. "Perhaps you're not applying the right redshift corrections, Kenna. It's a common rookie mistake." I would thank him meekly, making a note of his suggestion, all while knowing that he and Thorne were spending their nights poring over my booby-trapped data. I watched the server logs like a hawk. Just as I predicted, hours after my conversation with Chloe, there was a login to the hidden partition using the Pulsar password. They had taken the bait. Over the next few weeks, I saw them accessing the files again and again, copying the data, running simulations. They were swallowing the fabricated discovery whole. My greatest challenge was maintaining my composure with Chloe. She would stop by my office daily, offering coffee and a listening ear, asking for updates on my struggles. Any luck with that anomaly? She'd ask, her eyes gleaming with false concern. Each interaction was like swallowing shards of glass. She thought she was my confidante, all while acting as the linchpin in the plot to ruin me. I would give her vague, frustrated answers, watching as she subtly typed notes into her phone under the table. She was feeding them every piece of my performance. Dr. Finch and I communicated through encrypted channels. I sent him my real data, the Ethel findings, and he began the process of independent verification with 2 trusted colleagues at other universities. This was crucial. When I made my move, I needed unimpeachable third-party validation. "The trap is set, Kenna." He wrote back one day, "The data is solid. Their careers are now in your hands." 2 weeks before the symposium, Thorne and Ben made their move. They called a division meeting. Thorne stood at the front of the room, his chest puffed out, as you know. He began, "This division has been working tirelessly on the Kepler 186F system. While Dr. Sharma's initial work was promising, it took some senior guidance to unlock its true potential. Dr. Carter and I have had a significant breakthrough." He and Ben proceeded to present my fabricated discovery to the team. They announced the existence of a second habitable planet, showing slides filled with my flawed calculations and expertly rendered graphics based on my honeypot data. They didn't mention my name once. They presented it as entirely their own work. The team, unaware of the deception, erupted in applause. I clapped along with them, my face a carefully constructed mask of surprise and admiration, my heart beating a slow, steady drum of impending victory. Chloe caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small, pitying smile, as if to say, "Sorry it had to be this way." That evening, the official program for the Global Space Symposium was released. The keynote address, the most prestigious slot of the entire conference, was listed. Presenters Dr. Marcus Thorne and Dr. Ben Carter. Topic: A Second Earth, Discovery of a Habitable Twin in the Kepler 186F system. They had done it. They had put their names on my work and were about to announce it on the world's biggest stage. They thought they had achieved the perfect crime, silencing the prodigy and stealing her prize. They had no idea that the anomaly they were so proud of was the very thing that would tear their universe apart. The main hall of the symposium was buzzing, a cavernous space filled with the brightest minds in astrophysics. I found a seat in the middle of the auditorium, Dr. Finch sitting quietly beside me. He gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Deep breaths, Kenna," he whispered. "The signal is about to come through." On stage, Dr. Thorne and Ben Carter looked like kings surveying their domain. They stood at the podium, their faces illuminated by the massive screen behind them, which displayed the title of their presentation. Thorne began, his voice booming with false authority. He spoke of the Institute's legacy, of his leadership, and of the tireless work that had led to this historic moment. Then he handed it over to Ben. Ben walked the audience through the discovery. He was a confident presenter, and the data, to the untrained or unsuspecting eye, was compelling. He showed the light, curved dips, the transit data, the atmospheric composition charts, all from my meticulously crafted honeypot. The audience was captivated. There were murmurs of excitement, the frantic typing of journalists in the front row. I saw Chloe in the third row, looking up at them with adoration. She thought she had backed the winning horse, and here, Ben said, his voice swelling with drama as he clicked to the final slide, is the most crucial piece of evidence. The orbital resonance. As you can see, the new planet, which we have named Thorn, Carter 1b, exists in a perfect 2-1 resonance with Kepler 186F. This orbital stability is the final confirmation of its existence. This was it, the time bomb, the fatal flaw I had planted. A 2-1 resonance was plausible, but the specific gravitational calculations I had fed them were inherently unstable. Over a simulated 1,000-year period, the planets would collide. It was a subtle, catastrophic error that any true expert, if given a moment to check, would spot, but they had been so blinded by their greed and arrogance that they had never bothered to look deep enough. Ben finished to thunderous applause. The moderator stepped up. "Thank you, Dr. Carter and Dr. Thorne, for that absolutely groundbreaking presentation. We have time for a few questions." A few softball questions were asked and answered. Then I stood up and walked to the microphone in the aisle. A camera turned to me. The entire hall fell silent. Dr. Kenna Sharma, head of exoplanetary research at the National Institute. I said, my voice clear and steady. On stage, I saw Ben's smile falter. Thorne's face went rigid. "I have a question regarding the orbital resonance of Thorne. Carter 1b, I continued. Your model shows a 2-1 resonance, which is fascinating. However, my own models, based on the same raw data stream, showed that such a resonance would be gravitationally unstable, leading to system collapse. Could you please elaborate on the specific corrections you used to ensure long-term stability?" Ben stared at me, completely blindsided. He stammered, "Well, the corrections are complex, based on proprietary algorithms. They must be," I said calmly, "because my data shows something quite different. If the operator could please bring up file Sharma Ethel verification on the main screen." The moderator, intrigued, nodded to the tech booth. Suddenly, the screen behind Thorne and Ben changed. Their slide was replaced by my data, my real data. It showed a different orbit, a stable one, and it showed the atmospheric biosignatures they had missed entirely. "This," I announced, my voice resonating through the hall, "is the true nature of the second planet in the Kepler 186F system, which I have named Ethel. As you can see, its orbit is stable. More importantly, it shows confirmed biosignatures. The data presented by Dr. Thorne and Dr. Carter is, unfortunately, based on a corrupted and incomplete dataset. Panic was dawning on Thorne's face. "This is an outrage. This is my data. Is it?" I asked, my voice turning to ice. "Then perhaps you can explain this." The screen changed again. Now it displayed the Institute server logs, timestamps, IP addresses, a clear, damning record of Thorne's terminal accessing my password, protected files late at night, and this. The screen showed the keylogger report from Chloe's diagnostic on my computer. In the third row, Chloe went pale, looking as if she was about to be sick. The data you presented was from a honeypot, I stated, letting every word land with devastating weight. A flawed dataset I created and planted after discovering that my research was being systematically stolen. You didn't make a discovery, you walked into a trap. Dr. Finch stood up from his seat, I can confirm. He said, his voice carrying the weight of his reputation, that I and 2 other independent analysts have verified Dr. Sharma's real data on Ethel. Her findings are legitimate and revolutionary. The data presented by Dr. Thorne and Dr. Carter is, to put it mildly, fatally flawed. The hall erupted in a storm of whispers and frantic typing. The signal had been separated from the noise. Thorne and Ben stood frozen on the stage, their careers evaporating under the harsh lights. It wasn't a loud confrontation. It was a quiet, precise, public execution, carried out with nothing but facts. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for them. The symposium became a firestorm of scandal. The Institute's board launched an emergency investigation, but my evidence was so comprehensive, so irrefutable, that it was over before it began. The Kepler dossier, as I had named it, was their professional obituary. Dr. Marcus Thorne was forced into an immediate and disgraced retirement. Dr. Ben Carter was fired for academic fraud and data theft, his name now a toxic brand in the astrophysics community. Chloe Davis was also terminated. Her part in the conspiracy, though minor in scope, was a fundamental breach of ethics. I heard through the grapevine that she left the field entirely, unable to find another job. I felt a brief pang of sadness for the friend I thought I had, but it was quickly replaced by the cold reality of her choices. The Institute's board offered me an apology and Marcus's job as director. They offered me a massive raise, a bigger team, anything I wanted. I turned them all down. The place was tainted for me now. Its halls would always echo with the memory of betrayal. I no longer wanted to be a big fish in that poisoned pond. Dr. Finch had already been working behind the scenes. 2 days after the symposium, I received a call from the Director General of the European Space Agency. They had followed the events closely. They were impressed by my research on Ethel, but more than that, they were impressed by my methodical and ethical handling of a hostile professional environment. They offered me a position leading a brand new, multinational research project headquartered at their observatory in the Chilean mountains, with a blank check for resources and personnel. 6 months later, I stood on a platform in the Atacama Desert, the clearest sky on Earth stretching out above me. The air was thin and cold, but I had never felt more alive. The dome of the massive telescope beside me was open, aimed at a tiny, insignificant patch of sky in the constellation Cygnus. Insignificant to most, but to me, it was everything. It was where Ethel was waiting. I had built a new team from scratch, composed of the best and brightest minds from around the world who valued collaboration over credit. We were on the cusp of confirming the biosignatures, of changing humanity's place in the universe forever. I looked up at the endless tapestry of stars. My old colleagues had tried to steal my star, to add it to their own fading constellations. But in the end, they had only succeeded in helping me chart a new one, all my own. And from this vantage point, I could see the entire universe opening up before me.